Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Catharine Stimpson, and I have the honor of being the host of the Skirball Tapes. Welcome to the second episode of our inaugural series, and I am speaking to you from the office of Jay Wegman, the director of the Skirball Center at New York University. What is our purpose, our shared purpose? And I'm delighted to share it with everyone in the audience and beyond. Conversations with greatly creative figures of radical imagination who have brought us indelible acts of art or creativity. We will speak together with our guest for 40 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes of your questions. If you have a question, please go to the chat on your screen and send it, and it will be received. Our guest today, and it is such a pleasure and an honor to have him with us. Our guest today is a creative figure of global magnitude, the winner of the Kennedy Center Honors, the winner of the National Medal of Arts, of the French Government Order of Arts and Letters, and the winner of 2 Tony Awards, Bill T. Jones. Bill, he is a dancer, a choreographer, a director, a writer, an executive artistic director of New York Live Arts. He is also a prophetic thinker and a psychologist of dance and its worlds. A prophetic thinker and psychologist about race, sexualities, relationships, our communities, democracy. A prophetic thinker and psychologist about coercive power and sources of beauty, including the beauty of each of our own powers. Bill, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Bill, you know we are talking together and with our audience in difficult times. You know, as well as any, the unfairness and violence of the world. You are a Black man in white America. You have lived through 2 plagues and their griefs, the plague of AIDS and now COVID. You've been poor, but you have done the work. You have never stopped doing the work. And one of my favorite phrases about you, and I have many, you have written about the quote, fiercely archaic jazz of my imagination. I would love to know where the fuel for the fires of your radical imagination came from. I think they came early.
Oh, yeah, I think they did. You know, that statement, it surprised me when in your correspondence, you reminded me of having said that. Archaic in the sense that the crucible of my imagination was in some ways shaped by people of modest education whose ethos, worldview was almost Victorian. My mother, Estella, and her mother, Anna Edwards, loom large. Southern women. My grandmother was a sharecropper. So that's one place it starts. And then there's, of course, the American popular culture did its work as well. The first images that I saw coming back to me that were not the images of the people, quote, we were field workers carrying on, were images taken from Hollywood, things that I heard on the radio. Many of them were backward looking, since America was so taken with the nostalgic image of the beauty of the Black voice, the beauty of the Black body. They later you would understand that there was there was a relationship that the pop music of the 1960s and 70s had to the quote protest music of the 1960s and 70s. But at that time, I was sort of caught in this universe where these things were colliding. How does a Negro spiritual, as sung by my mother, and how does that couple with James Brown? And what does it mean to study, quote, serious dance in a world where we had a jukebox in our living room and people were getting down every Friday night? And we're talking some serious competitive dancing, you know, and people, many of who were having problems with alcohol and what have you, people who were the reason they were, quote, migrant workers, having left their homes in the South to go up north looking for whatever El Dorado they thought might be. The reason was they were oftentimes people who were displaced. Yes, I think it was an example of the Great Migration, but the people that I knew up close had backstories. They were running from something. And I remember there was a man called Grover. Maybe you read that in my book. His name was Grover. And he would get into his cups. This is in upstate New York, this ill-fated restaurant my parents were trying to have. And Grover would give tutorials about how you should perform. And he said, now listen, Billy, when the music go low, you got to go low. When the music go high, you go high. And he would be demonstrate. I thought, this is the man who I worked next to in the field. This is the man who didn't have all of his teeth, but you could see in that where he had been, and he had been through hell, but he still had this notion of he could bust a move. He could tell a joke. He could.
So this was your first dance teacher.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but you know, you're right. The people really knew how to. What was it Tulani Davis said years ago? African Americans taught the world to take a solo. You know, it's like the floor is yours. If you got the courage, get out there. You know.
But you know, there's another wonderful story. A wonderful story I'd like to have you help me tell. When the children went into the fields, and you don't like it, you don't like the work, and you're with your sister Rhodessa, and she recites poetry to you.
Well, she shared Sarah Teasdale with me. Can you believe
Sarah
that?
Teasdale, this rather precious white woman poet.
The years pass by beneath a cloudy sky. Where shall we meet? Who knows? Who knows? We used to cry reading these things. But what is it? What is that about that story that captures your imagination?
She talked to you about movies, didn't she? She talked to you about philosophy.
Well, yeah, she did. I think that I thank you for reminding me how important our discourse was. Of course, I have enshrined my older brother, Azel. Azel was the one who was a fan of Bismarck. Azel was the one who was studying German because he was so taken. Azel was the one that we had a wood pile, and I'd be sitting there, should have been working, he'd be telling me about, do you know you could be breathing genius now? Raphael is, there was something called the Renaissance. Do you know that you could be, I mean, yes. So yeah, Azel was that, but Rhodessa was the one that was a dreamer. And wasn't that article, there's a famous article, famous for me, it was a Look magazine or Life magazine, talking about modernist architecture. And that was the first time I heard the name Frank Lloyd Wright. Or, how do you say, neutron, right? These house built with a rock coming into the living room. Now, for country people who literally were fighting rocks all the time, I thought that was a great luxury to be able to live in that way. But that was Rhodessa who brought those ideas. And what's about that story? My mother would be shocked that we were so lazy that we would be sitting there daydreaming. And because, you know, what we were doing could have no value. It was.
Didn't you say your mother was a great worker? But
she was a great worker. And there's a mixed pride in that, because she said, you know, my mama was always proud because she was leading the row. Now, what that meant, now, of course, your references is to picking potatoes in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, but the reference to leading the row went to cotton picking. When you'd be out of bed at dawn, don't let the sun catch you in bed, and then you would be getting into bed at dark. And you had to, the pride was that her hands were quick and that they would like barely stop to drink because all day they would have to work harder than other people. We were not doing that. Something had gone awry. And she didn't understand it. I didn't understand
But
it.
you were imagining your future.
As much as a
You were
child can,
studying.
I suppose. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but Bill, you know so well that to possess a radical imagination, which you have, constantly changing, is to dream. And you have written, to dream is human. But you also understand, I think, that aren't dreams also nightmares?
It's true. Too often,
And
yes.
what are the dreams in your art that are about fear? Fears in there as well as these glowing imagined futures.
Well, you know, that every question you asked me today is so resonant, but so dangerous because night fears, fear being expressed was a sign of weakness.
Oh.
And this is maybe where I began to get this feeling something was different about me. I wasn't like the other boys in the family. And then if he's a sissy, or he's, you know, so
that was a curse, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And not everybody was fearful,
No.
but you could not express the fear. So this is where the issue of race and sexuality began to wrestle with each other. So I later learned, with the help of art writers, that the dreams are almost divine. But at that time, it was something you had to endure. Yeah, so that's, and maybe I still have that relationship now to what seems to be constantly revealing itself as and I don't want to be too purple here, the horror at the center of the world. And what is my relationship to that horror? Do you cower? Do you wet the bed? What is it? Or do you like build some persona that we shall overcome, or God damn it, I'm gonna like fight the power and what have you? Because that's an area that makes me very vulnerable when someone says you're so out there because inside you're scared.
But aren't we all, Bill?
I hear you.
Isn't part of the power of your art?
It's one of it is the fuel. I think it's part of the fuel. Now, of course, as we get older, we're not vessels that can burn this fuel with such efficiency as maybe when you're younger. And the vessel, the physical vessel, is fragile. And the psyche, I realize, also ages. It's fragile. So can you afford the fear? Can you afford the terror that you're used to face in your early day when you didn't know better? The answer is I have no choice.
Yes, but also
the answer is I have no choice. Yes.
We will die. We will die.
We will die. And there's different, unfortunately, I didn't know there were stages before death that could be death-like. I mean, when I grew up, I don't know about your experience, Catherine, but did anyone ever talk about Alzheimer's? You know?
But we talked about people who were a bit strange.
Senility, right. My dad used to say, he was quite great in that way. He said, you live and learn, you die and forget it all. And then, as I say in story time, you live, you learn, you forget it all, then you die. It's a new formula. And that maybe is one of those things revealed with time.
This is your wise father, Gus.
Oh, Gus Jones. And it's still a mystery. Is it Augusta or is it Argusta? We just called him Gus. I mean, we didn't. No, no, no.
And
People
you were
calling us.
with,
But,
you
and
were with.
one of the privileges of being a public person is that things get put in print now. So my father is officially Augusta. Yes, right.
But Bill, I have to say, your sense of the dream as an imagined future, your sense of the dream as nightmare, and your sense of a dream is taking us into some kind of exalted, transcendent world, a number of visions, but that it's Shakespearean, this triple sense. And I'd love you, if you would, to look at a photo of you as a young man. And,
Alas, poor York.
and what are you doing? There you are. You are playing one of the most, I'm playing, you're not performing this on stage, but there must be something in your imagination and in your sense of life and death.
I think this photo is important. It says so much about where the notion of collaboration came from. Because for me, when I see this work, I see the pride I have in being Arnie's first muse. When Arnie Zane was an aspiring photographer, and he would say, "You stand over there. You put this on. You do that. You do that." And he would make these. Well, what we're doing is sitting on a children's toy chest that's been hand painted. We're out by the ocean in San Francisco, and look at me wearing dance tights.
You're wearing this. And what do you think?
It was probably my idea, of course, to pick up the rock. Now, it was his idea to say, "Oh, the rock and your skull rhyme, so please turn your profile." But like I say, it is a picture of what it means to collaborate. Did we both say that we wanted a picture that evokes Hamlet? We didn't say it, but the picture does that. He was a great teacher, and he was a great collaborator, and he was, as they used to say in the old spiritual, he was the lover of my soul.
Right. The passages I have to tell you, Bill, first, that in the Shakespeare, it's a reference to Hamlet. And you were the young Hamlet. You were the shadow of the young Hamlet in the graveyard. And in the Hamlet, as you know, Hamlet is holding up a skull. You were holding up a stone and saying, "Alas, poor Yorick, I know him well." And yes, I love what you say about collaboration. And you were bringing together Shakespeare, the notion of the skull and the stone, images of the permanence of death and of brevity. Bill, I have to tell you, when I reread that description of the death of Arnie, I wept. The way you told it.
It's hard for me to read it, and it's hard for me to read it and not weep. And it's this season, that all came down. March, I think he left the hospital on the 28th, and I think he passed on March 30th, 1988.
Well, it is a beautiful, as I say, it brought me to tears. Your description of, but you went on.
Yes.
I'm doing even more work. But it leads me to ask you about a concept that I think might be important to us both. And that is the concept of poetic justice.
Catherine, could you help me with, you use that term, I use it. What's its meaning? How do you define poetic justice?
Well, I think we would agree, if justice is not done on earth, and your big pieces after Arnie's death, the Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Still Here, which are masterpieces, pieces of the 90s. For me, poetic justice is the arts doing justice to people who cannot speak for themselves.
Yes, yeah.
And I think your work is about art, but it's about justice too. And in this time with the invasion and murder in the Ukraine, I thought, and I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing with me, a moment about from Stalin's Russia in the 1930s, where there was a poet, Polish Jew named Osip Mandelstam, who wrote a poem about his words would live after his death. And though he died in the Gulag in 1938, he predicts that his words will live on. And I think one of the things you do in acts of poetic justice is to help people live on through art, their words to live on through art. And
You know, art has
are,
pretty broad shoulders. I was at a gala for the Young Arts Foundation in Miami, and I was sitting across from Emil Kong of the Mellon Foundation, and some philanthropists. The place was wall-to-wall philanthropists, and they were all saying the reason we have to support the arts is because it engenders empathy. And now we're saying that art is somehow, or it helps human values transcend the death of the authors. So that's a lot that art is expected to do. And a reading, was it Herbert Marcuse said, art is literally about teaching us to think more precisely. So art has a lot of stuff put on it.
and to be an artist, but Bill, you have very broad shoulders. You have very,
Thank you,
very
Catherine.
broad shoulders.
Did you want me to read?
understand
Did you want me to
I
read
would love
this poem?
it. I would love it. If I would hope that our audience would agree
Mhm.
that.
Is it true that
poem
it's
speaks to
called?
the
Is it true it's called 307? Did he call it 307? Poem 307, or
in
is it?
and the name at the end is the town where he was in exile
Mhm.
before he was sent to the Gulag, where he died 3 years later. Could you just read it for us?
You took away all the oceans and all the room. You gave me my shoe size and earth with bars around it. Where did it get you? Nowhere. You left me my lips, and they shape words, even in silence.
And I would, Bill, you correct me. You're the creator. You're the radical imagination. That in Still Here, that masterpiece Still Here,
Mm-hmm.
1994, I believe. Aren't you shaping words
Ah, yeah.
in taking the words?
Now, Catherine, allow me a little diversion here. I think a lot of my work, even my biggest works, were actually, and I'm going to do a little name dropping here, the great sculptor, Louise Nevelson, who once told an interviewer, I started doing my work to find out more about myself. Now, artists are famously self-involved. So work like Uncle Tom's Cabin, I had to face the fact that Arnie Zane and I had been able to live in a continent of two, as two disparate persons, one Black, one white, one Christian, one Jew, in a very hostile world. So by doing something that was encouraged by this woman, Frida Rosen, who was I think you would call it a Trotskyite social therapist. She was saying when one has problems, she didn't buy the Freudian thing, the analysis and all. She said, it tells you good stories about your parents did this, whatever. But she said, does it help you understand how to live in the world? So she said, when you are troubled, when you have a problem, you've got to socialize it. And socializing it in Uncle Tom's Cabin looked like stage ending with 52 bodies of every shape and size, naked, singing like children. Now, the historians, if you will, are able to say that it was a tool. Yes, it was a tool, but ultimately for me, it was something called building community and building identity. A work like still here was literally the quote, are you a dead and dying pariah, or are you member of a broad and grand tradition of people who come together to tell their truth? Now,
Bill, can I interrupt for a second? Can you sit back a little because we're losing your forehead?
yes, I'm getting more excited and I start coming towards you. So I'll sit back. You know, I'm not a laid back kind of guy. But how am I
Thank
doing?
God! Thank heavens for that.
But how am I doing in addressing? Because you laid great honor on me, and I'm trying to say that basically, like many artists, it's extremely. I'm fearful and self-involved. And I use what I have. And one of the things I have is a personality that works with people. And it is trying to pick up on, we are more alike than different. Now, do I still believe that? That's another issue. A lot of things have changed in the last 10, 20 years. But so I make these big spectacles, which is a way of saying to the world, I am not a lonely, shut off, unique anomaly. I am one of a body of people. And that affirmation is always important, right? Always important. You know how Picasso was purported to say, you know how Picasso was purported to say, I don't seek, I find. You know, he had a big ego. I don't know if I ever had the confidence to say, I find. I'm like the alchemist holding out the bowl of crude matter, or base matter, hoping a cosmic ray comes along and converts it into gold. So that's what those big experiments were in some way.
But they were wonderful experiments. They were your creations.
Mm.
You and Arnie created a dance company. After his death, you keep the company going. And you keep creating. And then in 2011, you, with Dance Theater Workshop, become New York Live Arts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But during this time, you bring the community into your work, don't you? But you sense the audience.
This what did you say? I sense the audience.
Sense of the audience.
Oh yes.
Touching, you wish to alert the audience to the possibilities of the radical imagination as well.
Well, I don't know if this is a secret, but you know, the audience is for me, a many-headed hydra. Be careful assuming that you know what they are. They are a monster, but a monster. They are a creature that sits there, but it is multifaceted. Therefore, what is my posture in relationship to it? One way to answer that is saying the Black church. You know, the Black church in its most idealized way was the congregation is there singing, and then somebody stands up and testifies. And they say, oh, my husband is sick, or oh, my child is missing, and the community says, we hear you. We hear you. Now, is that African American? Is it ancient Greek? Whatever it is, there's something about that testifying publicly that the audience offers an opportunity to engage in. Now it becomes, it gets a little, now the audience is also a financial opportunity. A lot of things go now into the making of art. What will be the return on it? Does the art secure the well-being of those persons at New York Live Arts, myself, my love? We're old men now. If I die, will the art make sure that my husband will be taken care of? If he dies,
your husband, husband is the artist Bjorn Amelin, yes? Yes,
the artist Bjorn Amelin. We were married 1990. No, I'm sorry, 2002. Yes, yeah. Yes, but so the audience has a twin function. I think sometimes some of my critics have been really offended when they get the whiff that I am conducting a revival meeting. And I don't mean to conduct a revival meeting, but I am trying to speak in a language that is deep and honest. I testify, I call out, you call back. That is a useful exercise. That is useful exercise. Anything else is demagoguery. I know that now. Let's switch, going from performance to, is it true that Mark Rothko said, I want to do a painting that even if you encountered it in the jungle, you would know it was art. Now, what is that? I am a genius. I have an idea. And my idea is so strong that it will penetrate through the thicket of your Luddite natures. I don't think I had the confidence to believe that. And maybe that's racial. Who are you to swagger about as if you have anything to teach the world? What you can do is tear your chest open and reveal it. And as we learned in a musical like Fela, we talked about, tonight we're going to bring the God into the room. We're going to pull it up and pull it down. And the audience finds themselves through their hips, through their hearts, they're moving. And suddenly we have a community. Now that's one thing that that's like a priest-like role. That's also not without its problems, but all these things are what an audience represents for me.
Bill, just for our audience, Fela was a musical that was on Broadway about the great Nigerian singer that you directed and for which you won one of your Tonys. Fela, Fela. And it was exactly that kind of exalted experience. So, Bill, is it through, I'm not going to say art, because I think you have a legitimate distrust of overgeneralizations. You've seen too many overgeneralizations that are false.
Yes.
But is art takes us, exalt our soul at its greatest, but also forces us to recognize it at its darkest. That when
there was another question that does art. Would you one more time, please, Catherine? It was a very beautiful question.
Well, as you speak, and as I've watched your work and had the pleasure of knowing you, that you will take us to the heights. Your art will take us to the heights, and it's always changing. You're responding to your feeling, you're responding to your time. Formally, you have changed over the years. You are not doing the kind of dances you were doing in 1972 when you were a 20-year-old boy in Binghamton, New York. You're bringing in the community, you're doing more epic dances. But it seems to me your last epic, called Deep Blue Sea, which for people who haven't seen it, is his adaptation of Melville's Moby Dick, with technology on the floor. And at the end, he brings in 100 community members to share in the dance, which is almost a Bill T move now, is to bring in or talk about community members. So members of the audience, you might be in a Bill T Jones dance, but we go, you take us into the whale of despair, but you also move us out into the possibility of rebirth.
Thank you, Catherine, for making legible what I think made some people were scratching their head, wondering what the hell is going on here. First of all, I use a problematic and probably irritating term.
We need your eyes, darling. We need your eyes. You're not in the wheel now. We need your eyes.
Well, first of all, I use the term modality because yes, it was Melville, but Melville was simply a jumping off point.
Yeah.
The story of Pip, a minor character in the book, who's not so minor, really, but we're taught that he is a minor character. That story, Pip, was invisible to me when I was reading the book as a teenager in upstate New York, but it was, as things have come down in our culture, I more and more see him and even identify with him. And so that piece wants to deal with trying to exhume or extricate Pip from all of the verbiage around Moby Dick. But it's also Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which is a cultural artifact that has been what I called Black historyized. Just like Black History Month, we tout it out to make ourselves feel good. I'm saying, but I don't think you're really hearing what it is. So I did violence to it by speaking it backwards, so it becomes a kind of elevated Dada. And Dada is almost a bad word for me right now, because my generation thought that Dada was the only response to how manipulative, how closed off art had become. So everything has to be in some ways ridiculous. That's what it is for me. It is those modalities of Melville looking for Pip, and Pip talks a lot about Trayvon Martin. If you think about it, lot to say about Michael Brown, lot to say about George Floyd. And then there is Martin Luther King's great speech that America can wear like a lapel. And it says, but did you really understand what he was saying? And that but is not only to white America, it's also to me. Did you take it for granted that you had a great genius, a moral genius, that you can quote on Martin Luther King Day? And then there was the question of my personal story. It starts, this piece that you speak about so beautifully, it goes from 1 to 10 to 100. 1 is the lonely narrator, author of this work, who is talking about all the things I just said. 2 is my company, which is my raft, if you will, which has been through all the weather, losing Artie, through HIV, through the attack of the woman from the New Yorker, all those things. The company has been my raft. And then there is the world, which is suggested, you know how the Chinese say 10,000 things when they're thinking of many things? Well, I say 100 represents all the big group. And we live in an era right now, and I know, having running an art space, and how angry young people are around issues of not being heard. So my friend, Italian friend, I'd say he was a friend, maybe a little more than acquaintance. He said, you Americans have so many opinions, but you don't know anything. So my prompt to those 100 people, was, what do you know? And don't be ironic or cute about it. What do you really know? And if you had the chance to stand up and take a microphone, can you speak about what you know? Those 100 people is made of 100 individuals that speak to that one lonely individual that we met in the beginning of the piece. For me, that is the arc, structural arc, and the aspiration of Deep Blue Sea.
Which I hope people in the audience who have not seen it will have a chance to see it, at least in video. It is
it's going to actually be shown probably in this country, one of its last performances as the Deep Blue Sea at the Mann Center in May. And if you want more information about it, please contact us at New York Live Arts. It's going to be in a beautiful indoor-outdoor space in the park in Philadelphia. We are touring something called What Problem? And as you know, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in the 1920s about the problem of the color line. And he said that the curious thing about being a problem, it is difficult for even someone who has never been nothing. It's very difficult for those of us who have never been anything else to understand what in fact we're talking about. What problem? So by taking away all of the beautiful technology of Peter Negrini, the videographer, and that fantastic decor of Liz Dillard, the great architect, what's left is a work that is now tourable. And we just came from a tour that was Penn State, and we were in Arizona. We've been 5 cities in the last 2 months or so doing What Problem. And in each place, we bring community members, not the 100, but as many as 25 and up, to do it on a proscenium, which means it takes away the 365 degrees. That is the business of art, Catherine. I thought Deep Blue Sea was going to be my swan song. I'm retired. I want to do one big thing that has to be done site-specifically in one place. But that's not the way the business of the art works. You've got to tour to really And now it is a proscenium work, which in some ways is more conventional, but in other ways makes something in the heart of the piece more clear.
Bill,
And yes,
I am
people
not
can
going
see
to,
that.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to listen to you say, I have one more big work. I see you as, it just will come. It may be a big work, it may be a small work, but you always do the work. No,
It's true, and I
Bill,
thank
I
you.
have-
Yeah, and you, I
yeah,
don't know if this
because
is telling you stories, but you are on the board and of my board, and you're one of those voices that has this kind of feeling like, yes, we can,
well,
because
yes,
I
we
think
can.
I'm a depressive person, and there's often days when I feel I can't, but for some reason, I don't know if it's the hallelujah spot that comes with this desire to praise when you don't have belief in God. Something does come out, something is made. You're
Yes,
right.
you do come to the, Bill, we have a couple of people, we have some questions now, but
Mhm.
I need another couple of minutes. And to our audience, will you wait for the questions? Because I need just another couple of minutes with Bill. We had planned an ending that was going to refer to his big work of 2012 called Story Time. Or
Mhm.
we might, or maybe we were going to read, and there it is. Story Time is Bill reading stories with as the dancers perform. It's a very interesting use of stillness in motion. And then we'd also thought, Bill, you'll remember, we'd also thought that you might, as a final reading, do something you did in 1994. It was at the Gay Games in New York. And we are in a moment now where LGBTQI people are under attack.
Mm.
And would you make a choice?
Oh, would I make the choice?
Would you like me to make the choice?
Please, Catherine, make the
All right.
choice. Yeah.
I'm going to make the choice in this way. I owe people in the audience, find about Bill T. Jones's Princeton lectures called Story Time, because it's really another act of his radical imagination. What do you do with dance? How do you tell stories? How do you understand our feelings? How do you understand our place in a world that can be filled with terror and filled with exaltation? But my choice, Bill, before we turn to the questions, is to summon. There's so many Bills on the riding on those broad shoulders. Summon 1994, those last words you spoke to the Gay Games that ended in several thousand people rising with an ovation.
That's
We'll hear
fantastic,
the
Catherine. Well, I will read
friends
it.
of the and we'll turn to the questions.
The only disclaimer I would say that this was an example of oration. It was designed to be read in an arena with a lot of people there who were primed. So that's its tone. And I'm reading the last, I'd say the last fifth of it. And
yes,
it goes like,
6 or 7 lines.
yes, it goes like this. We can make music. We can take cloth, wood, stone, and make it walk that walk and talk that talk. We can dress a king and undress him too. We can remember those that others feel are best forgotten. We can tear up a dance floor and put it back together again. We can talk loud in public. We can be fierce. We can be small. We can be mighty. We can be too much. We can be just enough, just in time. We can. We have to.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. And thank you for the muchness, the overflowing muchness of Bill T. Jones. We have a question here, and just a couple for the last few minutes we spend with our audience. And I would say, I don't know how you feel, but I miss seeing the audience that's out there, but I'm very glad it's there. And I think, here, a question. You've worked with artists across so many genres, visual, music. Can you tell us more about collaboration and its importance in your work?
Mm,
especially in relation to what you've shared about the audience. How does
right.
collaboration relate to community?
Well, let me swing for a moment to the personal. Having very intense conversations with my family, my sisters, all like many women, um, they have wounds that come from trusting somebody else, a partner, failed marriages, what have you. And I said that I think that a marriage can only work when you have a shared dream. I'd say a work of art, those persons, now John Cage and Indeterminacy, Merce Cunningham aside, it has to do with someone having a shared aspiration, maybe not even articulated, but something that they feel together. Collaboration regularly challenges that notion. I am a real son of a bitch, if I'm allowed to say that. Because of everything that was denied me, I'm so possessive of agency. So sometimes it makes me a bully. But ultimately, it is, I want to get to that place that we can all agree, the world is different after this work. And you can only get to it by going through it. I have great faith in collaboration. I don't know how else we're going to get out of this world that we're in right now without working with others. I always start with the idea, a set of questions for myself, but I've got to, let's choose the right word, infect others with those questions. That's my take on collaboration.
Effect, yes. Contagion can be excitement. It need not be a disease. It's double-edged.
Yes, yes. It's scary any way you cut it, because it is an idea, and ideas are dangerous.
Yes, they are, and that's why they must be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, my friend. What can art teach us about ethics?
Ethics.
In the present moment, in addition to empathy?
Yes, I think this is once again, that it's so easy to get it wrong here and become sentimental in any way, because artists, I find, are often selfish sons of bitches. They're fearful and they are self-involved. However, as Kirk Varnedoe, the great curator from the Museum of Art, told me once, I said, why are artists important? He says, because artists are faster than the rest of us. Faster. They can sniff what's happening. They have other ways of understanding what's happening. They do us a service by their strangely disengaged engagement. They teach us how to think differently. Now it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but I think at its best, that's what art has done for me. That's what it's done for me. Has it made me more empathic? I was looking at the work of, let's say, you, or if you're a fan of Saul LeWitt or the Minimalists. I mean, is Donald Judd, does Donald Judd teach empathy? No, he teaches something about looking closely and thinking. And if you're a fan of Hannah Arendt, as I am, thinking is its own reward. It is a function of this brain that we have, and it's what, in some ways, it makes us human. So art, I would put with empathy. I would put this idea, it makes for acuity, which makes for judgment, better judgment. I think artists, actually, if you let them do what they do and you present it correctly, it is good for democracy. People have to struggle with something intangible, like an idea or a sensation. That, I believe, art can do that. Now, I'm an artist of the body. I can also seduce you, playing to, quote, baser instincts like sex and so on. But there's something about that too. What agency do you give that body on stage, since you want that body to please you on stage? But what if that body withholds pleasure, but you cannot stop looking? That's interesting. That's important. I think it's good for our democracy to struggle with such issues.
You know, Bill, there's also an ethic of gratitude.
Mm.
And I wish to practice the ethic of gratitude now. I wish to thank you for your art, done in circumstances, for its scope, for its radical imagination, for giving us works of art that are indelible in our culture, and for simply continuing to do the work. As I said, I will never let you say in my presence, I only have one big thing left. I think you have multitudes. You have multitudes.
Well, thank you, Catherine. You're wonderful. I'm so proud to know you and to whenever engage with you intellectually. I'm enriched, and I thank you very much.
In Richards, and to our audience, I think I probably speak for all of us to practice the ethic of gratitude to Bill T. Jones for being with us so generously today. Thank you, Bill, and for all that you have done since you were that 20-year-old boy.
As they say in Fela land, say yeah, yeah. Everybody say yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
goodbye for today's
Goodbye.
Skirball
Goodbye.
Tapes. Thank you for being with us. Yeah.